Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad that you're with us and delighted to have one of the great guys in horse racing on, and one of the top trainers as well, Mark Casse, who this weekend, War of Will, his big horse favored in the Louisiana Derby, trying for a equine hat trick down there at the fairgrounds. He's already run the LeCompte and the Risen Star. And Mark, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Kenny.
So War of Will, when did you get a feeling that you had a horse that's going to be something kind of special here on the scene?
We got him from France. My brother bought him in France, I think in March. And I think it was about May or so that we got him in New York. He flew into New York, and pretty well from the beginning, he kind of acted like he was something special. So I told some of my friends, I guess in August, when we were going through all that with Wonder Godot, getting ready to run in the Travers. She had just won the Queen's Plate, and I told Gary Barber and a few of my friends, I said, we have another Wonder Godot, and his name is War of Will. And so, yeah, we've been touting him for some time.
And do you get a little excited? You've been around the game. You've won. You've had champions. You've had Teppan and World Approval, Classic Empire, almost a Derby win there for you. Do you get excited, or do you keep a little reservation as you get closer to Churchill Downs? You're hoping and all goes well this weekend.
I try, I do get a little excited, but I just know there's so many things, so many bridges still to cross that, it's been asked me a lot of times, do I ever dream of winning the Kentucky Derby or thinking about those things? And I don't, Kenny, and I don't do it because I don't want to be disappointed. So I kind of just play each day as it comes, and but I'm excited.
Yeah, it's hard not to when it's hard not to when you had the thought even of a Derby, I would imagine. If you're an owner, a trainer, you're a jockey that's got on a horse and you're thinking, hey, I could actually be in the Derby. There's just something about the Derby.
Yeah, I mean, NBC did a story about my brother and I when I think I was 10 years old. And I said, one day I'm going to win the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
So, so far that hasn't happened. There's, as far as a trainer, I don't have a whole lot more goals out there that I feel I need to achieve or want to achieve. But that's definitely one of them.
I have a feeling NBC will be pulling that clip out again.
They used it. I think they used it on Classic Empire, but it was, it was, to predict that or to say that, I'm 48 or 48. I'm 58 now. So it was 48.
You look
years
48.
ago. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that is something. And what a great story as well. Your father, Norm, so well respected in the business. Your son, Norm, now out on his own in the business. You're in the Canadian Hall of Fame this year. You're a finalist for the Racing Hall of Fame in Saratoga, New York.
Yeah.
So it's just a great story. Your whole life has been a great story, and the Casse family's meant a lot to horse racing, and I think it's special that you have a Derby shot. I really do.
Well, I appreciate that, and you mentioned the Hall of Fame. I would say to you, if we could accomplish that, that's something that I told my dad I was going to do when I was 12. And if we could win the Kentucky Derby, I may just retire. Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. Let's see. So you're going to win the Derby at 10. You're going to be in the Hall of Fame at 12. Did you say by any chance buy Apple stock when you were about 15? Someday there'll be something called Apple.
I wish I had. I'm not that smart. My dad's always said, if it doesn't win you don't know anything about it. So I wouldn't be that clever,
You're in the Canadian Hall of Fame. You have been the Sovereign Award winner for the Outstanding Trainer in Canada, a record 10 times. You've won 7 Triple Crown races in Canada. How many people think you're Canadian, Mark?
A lot.
I mean, I figured a lot of people don't know you're an Indiana guy that grew up in Kentucky.
They don't realize I was born in Indiana and I've spent my large part of my career in Kentucky. I can consider when we run at Keeneland and Churchill, I tell everybody, now you're playing in my house.
Yeah.
We just had that conversation recently about whether we go to the wood or whether we go to the bluegrass with a horse. I said, I feel much more comfortable going to Keeneland. I said, then they're playing in my house. And so I consider Kentucky my house.
Probably extra special. They kept saying, when are you going to win a Breeders' Cup? And you did. Two of them, the Juvenile Fillies and the Mile at Keeneland were your first two. So I guess that made it even more special.
Yeah, well, yes, it was, because my first, I did win a couple races when I was 17 at a small fair in Massachusetts. My dad, he had me up getting my trainer's license at 17. But the first major racetrack I ever competed at and won was Keeneland. I won with a horse called Joe's Coming, and anybody knows it was for $5,000. And it was kind of a unique story because anybody knows Keeneland, they have two wires. Well,
yeah.
I was going to run second in the race, and the rider on the horse in the lead pulled up at the wrong wire. He pulled up the first wire, and we beat him in nose. We got up in the last jump at the real wire. And so, Keeneland has been my entire life. I've been going there since I was a little boy to the horse sales. So to win the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, it was, any Breeders' Cup is special, but that one was even more special, and for it to be the first one.
We're talking with Mark Casse. He's in the Canadian Hall of Fame, a finalist, and I think he'll be in it this year. I voted for you. Not that
well,
matters.
That's good. At least I have one, I know.
You'll have more than that's my prediction. How about that? I'm making a prediction. You were predicting derbies when you were a kid. I'm predicting Mark Casse's in the Hall of Fame this year. That's my prediction.
Well,
right now.
That would be something special and very, very emotional. Now I have to tell you, I told you I don't dream of winning the Kentucky Derby, but I have dreamed of being in the Hall of Fame, and it always goes back to my father. It'll be, if someday I do get in the Hall of Fame, it'll be a very, very tough speech for me because of, memories of my dad. And some of my greatest memories of my young life was Saratoga. I mean, it was every year I couldn't wait to go to Saratoga.
Yeah, it's special. And you mentioned your dad, Norm. A paper in Lexington did a story. My father, who's 90 years old, thank God. We go to the state high school basketball tournament every year. It's a big deal in the state of Kentucky. If people been to Kentucky, they know it's a big deal. He's been going since 46. But when they asked me about it, I told him, and I think you had that with your dad too, regardless of the deal, I mean, there's a generation that grew up. It was a big deal to have that sports bond of some kind. Of course, yours with your dad working and learning under one of the great horsemen is different, but there's something about that father-son bond, isn't it? And I saw that with your son, Norm, all those, I was going to say all those years, not that many years ago he left you. He's been on his own about a year.
Yeah, no, I can remember one of the best times ever. We rode in a horse van from Ocala, because my dad owned a horse van company when I was younger, and I think I was 12, and we rode on the van together, and we watched Secretariat win the Kentucky Derby, and those kind of things you just don't forget. And then you talk about my son Norman, to win the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, for him to be by my side there. I mean, I've been so lucky in my life, and to be able to, so fortunate, and such great moments. And then I'll never forget us going over to Royal Ascot either together, Norman and I. And it's been an amazing ride.
And the ride with War of Will, what makes him special? What makes him feel as he goes in this weekend to the Louisiana Derby on March 23rd? What makes him that Kentucky Derby contender, do you think? What qualities do you have that really stand out to you?
Well, if you look, a couple things. If you look at some of I went back in memory and looking at some of my champions, the Teppins, the World Approvals, the Classic Empires. they all have the ability to either make their race or the ability to settle off the pace if need be. And that is what War of Will has. If nobody wants the lead on Saturday, he can go to the lead. If somebody wants to give us a crazy pace, he'll sit right behind them. I think his last two races have been extremely impressive because things haven't went his own way. In the Lecomte, he was 4 or 5 wide. He was 4 or 5 wide in the first turn, 4 or 5 wide in the second turn. He was able to overcome that. And then in the Risen Star, there was so much said because he drew the 13 post. And I told everybody, I said, if he's as good as I think he is, it's not going to matter. He had to do a lot. He had to do a lot early on in that race, and all those horses that were up anywhere close to the pace finished absolutely nowhere. The only horse running at the end was him, and even for a second, it looked maybe at the eighth pole that maybe some horses were going to gain on him, and they did get within a couple lengths. But if you watch after the race, he takes off again.
Yeah.
And, it was like I said to Tyler directly after the race, I said, were they getting to you? He said, we could have run around 3 more times. He said it wouldn't have mattered. And so that's why I have so much confidence in him. You saw it this weekend. I thought, both of Bob's horses ran extremely good races off the long layoffs, but they were both had compromised trips, and it cost them the race. So far, War of Will has had compromised trips and still been able to win, and so that's why I have so much confidence in him.
You mentioned you keep an eye on Baffert's too, of course. Improbable and Game Winner just recently ran in the Rebel out there. Mark, do you keep an eye on kind of the whole thing, and you think other trainers they're all keeping an eye on War of Will, and everybody's going to be aware. It's not going to wait till it happens when you get to Churchill Downs. Everybody's aware of what's going on out there, I imagine, like a coach keeps up with other teams.
Yeah, I can't speak for anybody else. I would be surprised if they didn't. But of course I watch. I keep an eye on the competition and certain trainers, and I would think Bob would probably be watching this weekend, and Bill Mott, and Bill's definitely going to be watching. He's got a horse in the race.
I hope Bill's watching.
Yeah, Bill will be watching. You know what? Bill's horse is good.
He's got a nice horse.
Yeah, I mean, it's no walkover this weekend. Todd's got a good horse. So we all watch each other, don't we? Anybody that tells you they don't's lying.
It's a small world, this racing world, isn't it? When you start breaking it down.
It is. And but the nice thing is, win, lose, or draw. We're all competitive, but we're also, I think, good losers, and can sit there and I have the utmost respect for those 3 guys. I mean, I think Bob is probably the greatest of all time. At least he is of anybody that I've ever been around. And Bill Mott has been my idol since I started at 18. Bill was probably about 5 or 6 years ahead of me, and he was the leading trainer at Churchill, and I just admired him. And I mean, how can you not admire all the accomplishments of Todd Pletcher? So those are just to be able to even be put somewhere in with their names as we talk about things, is a great honor.
Mark Casse has War of Will running this weekend in the Louisiana Derby. Interesting here. You won the Lecomte. You won the Risen Star. I was reading this is only going to be, if you get this, you'll only have the 3rd horse to ever complete the hat trick. And they've been racing a while down in Louisiana. I mean, this is a pretty impressive to win those big 3 races going to Churchill.
I've only recently read that. I didn't realize it was that tough of accomplishment. It's just for us, and I do this. You saw it with World Approval. You saw it with Tepin. You saw it. Well, I struggled with Classic Empire because he threw a few curveballs at us along the way. But I just soon run them as train them. And I kind of feel like right now we are at the top of our game, and where the other horses are, you've got to worry about, you throw a big race like some of these horses did last Saturday. How do they react from that race? Do
Mm-hmm.
they go backwards or do they go forward? I feel like our horses continuing to move forward. And the one thing, again, that I would say about the good horses I've trained in the past, they seem to thrive on running
Mm-hmm.
and racing. And War of Will is bigger and stronger today than he was a month ago. And he was bigger and stronger a month ago than he was the month prior. And those are all things that you're looking for. And in all honesty, it's not something that we can train into them. It's not something we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Either they do it or they don't do it. And the great ones do.
And you mentioned you're almost like a throwback. Remember, there was a time if you didn't have a lot of races in your horse coming to Kentucky, something must have happened. And now
Right.
it's so sporadic. I remember going back to Barbaro. Is he going to really only run in the Florida Derby and then try to come in? Going that far back, and Big Brown, and we can mention other Animal Kingdom. I thought that was a turf horse, and it's really been. I think one of the biggest changes is you don't have the standard route. At least some trainers don't that they used to have. Do you think that's a fair thing to say?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it used to be, but things change. I mean, and life changes, the world changes, and I think every horse and every trainer does it differently. I'm one more for the more starts I can get into him. I just feel like, and War Will, he's got a lot of races under his belt.
Yeah.
It was on the grass, and I just think it's what works for me. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just the way that I do things. And uh, I recently had a conversation with Mr. Oxley, because as much as I love Saratoga just eats my lunch every year. I mean, it gets me. And I said to him, I guess at the end of Saratoga, I said, Mr. Oxley, I said, we got to make some changes if we're going to be more competitive here, I guess. I said, I got to reevaluate our program and how I do things. I said, the problem is we've won 5 Breeders' Cups, or at the time we had won 4. We, of course, won 5th this year in the last 4 years. I don't know that I want to change that. And he said, don't change a thing. We've been to the Derby, been unlucky in the Derby. But I think in the last 6 years, I think Mr. Oxley's had 5 Derby starters, or maybe it's 5 years and 4 Derby starters. And until my dying day, I will go to my grave saying that Classic Empire was the best horse in the Kentucky Derby. Yeah. So, we've been unlucky. A couple times we've been wiped out in the first 100 yards. So I know one thing about horse racing: no matter how good you are, you need some luck.
Yeah, especially in a horse field of 18 to 20, and
absolutely,
that. And if everything goes perfect this weekend, you win with War of Will, wins the Louisiana Derby as he's favored to do. That's it. You take him on to Churchill. What would be the schedule?
Well, he'll probably go to Keeneland. I would take him to Keeneland because that's where our main division will be early on.
Yeah.
He's not going to get real far away from David Carroll. David Carroll's done a tremendous job for us. He's my assistant in New Orleans. We would probably move over to Churchill maybe 10 days out or something. He's already got a lot of experience at Churchill. He spent all that time at the Breeders' Cup. And but what we will have to do is, you'll see between races, we haven't done a whole lot with him because of the schedule. It's worked out good. You'll see, since we're going to have 6 weeks, you'll see him pick up some. You'll see him have a couple stronger breezes than he has recently, just because of the time between races.
And again, if he wins this weekend, you might get even a little more excited thinking about Churchill Downs.
Oh, yeah. You hold your breath, right? Every day. It's funny because the first text I get every morning from Gary Barber, how is he? He doesn't ask. He doesn't give me a name. He just says, "How is he?"
Never ask how's Mark Casse, right? Just how is he?
No, that's not. No, but you're right. Gary Barber does. Gary is a wonderful guy. He is a true gentleman and a friend. And so he'll ask but first he asks how the horse is. And can I tell you this? A lot of how Mark Casse feels is how War of Will feels.
Yeah.
So the two go hand in hand.
I was going to say, yeah, it's a lot easier to get up when the horse is doing well and running well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
Hey, Mark, I really appreciate your time. I know you're between schedules, training and racing and all in the afternoon, so thanks for being with us. And he is not a Canadian. He was born in Indiana. He grew up not far from Churchill Downs. On NBC, I bet we show the house again. That's like right on the street, by the way, isn't it? I mean,
no, it is. It's like one house from the parking lot at the East Gate, I think it is. So, yeah.
And they'll be putting...
I listen to a lot of calls there, so...
They may be putting a plaque up where Kentucky Derby winning trainer and Hall of Famer in this year's class, Mark Casse, lived. They may be putting that plaque up. Good luck to you on that.
Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the visit.
Anytime. Thank you, Mark Casse, one of the great gentlemen in the sport. Terrific trainer, has War of Will this weekend. We'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this.